It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. It's been a couple of good weeks for the University of Louisville. Actually, a couple of good months now. We got a new president, a new athletic director, lots of new folks at the University of Louisville, and hopefully a new start in 2018. So what have we got on the show today? Well, does the weather and specifically barometric pressure affect suicide? What role does ketamine have in treating depression? We'll talk to a U of L doctor about a couple of studies he's done on those topics. But first, there are more than, 130,000 Louisville Cardinals spread across the globe. They are U of L graduates and alumni. Kelly Hodges is the president of the U of L Alumni Club this year, and he's here to talk about what's going on at U of L and with the alumni at U of L. Kelly, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Good to see you.
Glad to be here.
We first met at commencement, didn't we?
We did. A month ago.
A month ago. Yes. So the president of the U of L Alumni Club does what at commencement? What do you get to do?
Well, actually, I got a chance to speak to the graduates and welcome them to the Alumni Association. So it's always an exciting time for graduates that day.
Is that number right? Is it 130,000 across the globe?
It is.
Is it pretty close?
Very close. It's about 138,000 living alumni across the globe.
Any idea who the oldest living alumni is?
That is a great question, and I do not know.
The answer? I bet
not.
You got somebody that's more than 100 years old living
Probably.
Okay. All right, well, let's talk about the U of L Alumni Club. First of all, just to kind of explain, other than just a group of U of L alumni that you automatically become a member of when you graduate, what is the U of L Alumni Club? How do you describe it to folks?
Yeah, well, everybody is part of the Alumni Association when you graduate from the university. The board is a voluntary board, so all of us have other things going on in the community. I'm vice president of sales at UPS, but we all have obviously a connection to the university. All graduated, and we're trying to make the most positive experience for past, present, and future alumni that we can. There is a alumni and development advancement group at Louisville, obviously employed, and we provide guidance to them. So that's what we're looking to do, is to create that positive experience.
And how many clubs do you have? I'm going to call them clubs. Or are they chapters, or what do you call them?
There are multiple chapters throughout the country,
okay.
For all over, coast to coast. From all four corners. We have them in California and Florida, and obviously there's local chapters here in the metropolitan area. But we have a very unique setup. 80,000 of our 139,000 living alumni live here in the metropolitan area.
Oh, in Louisville and surrounding counties?
In the surrounding
really?
counties. So it's very unique that we don't have to go too far to be in front of a lot of our alumni.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that big a ratio. So, whatever, 80,000, that's well more than half.
It is. And obviously then we have a lot that are spread out all over the world. And they can use their local chapter to participate in events at their in their community, wherever that may be. When they can't get here to do things locally, they can be with their chapter.
We're talking with Kelly Hodges, who's the president of the U of L Alumni Association this year in 2018. When did you graduate?
I graduated, a two-time graduate, undergrad in 93, and then I came back and got my MBA in 2001.
So your major was what?
Finance.
So you went finance, MBA, and now you're at UPS doing...
And I'm on the sales side. Yeah, I'm in the business development side, but I do use that background a lot. The business background has been great.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that have been going on here in the last couple of years with U of L. It's been, as you well know, and as I talked about the head of the show, it's been a rough couple of years for the University of Louisville. What's been the take from the alumni, specifically those, I guess, outside Louisville that may or may not be getting all this news about all the stuff that was going on here?
Yeah, well, it has been an interesting time for sure, and I always say that there's headwinds will always come to every organization, and universities aren't excluded from that. And there's certainly been some headwinds, but there were great things that happened here before that, and there will certainly be great things that happen after this. But the alumni perception of it is always a little different than, let's say, a fan base. The alumni who went to school here or graduated from here or had an experience on campus, they're always going to be alumni, and they're always going to be very proud of that. So they're concerned. Obviously, everybody wants to have the best for their university, their alma mater, but I think there's a lot of positive going on right now. The enthusiasm around Neely coming in specifically has been outstanding.
President Bendapudi, you're talking about.
President Bendapudi, who I've had the chance to meet with one-on-one, and she is a fantastic individual with a great vision. And I think people are going to be super excited to see that. But the alumni have that concern of where do we go from here. But I think in the past few weeks and months with Vince Tyree coming on in athletics, there's been some really positive news. I think there's been exceptionally positive news on campus. And I always tell people, if you haven't had a chance to walk through this campus recently, and I mean, when I say recently, for some people it's been 20, 25, 30 plus years, they need to do that. Because what we have going on over here is super exciting. And the vibrant nature of the student population right now seems to be going on with or without any negative press that may go on outside.
Yeah, I tell folks the same thing about for years I've told folks the same thing about the campus. It's just a total different campus than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Completely different, yeah. And the one thing I think that's interesting is, I went to school 25 years ago. Some people went to school before that. Some people have gone after that. We've all had a little bit different experience because our university has changed in a positive way dramatically over the years. And when you come here today and graduate, when I told the graduates a month ago, their experience was different than my experience. But it was also different than an experience 3 or 4 years ago because the campus looks a little different. So we're trying to get to a steady state very quickly. But with the on-campus living that we have today and the cranes in the sky, as I always say on campus, it is becoming a vibrant university now and will be in the future. And people need to come take a look at it. The time to reconnect is now. With Neely coming in, I think it's a very positive time for alumni to reconnect, regardless of whether they've been connected in the past.
I want to talk a little bit more about President Bendapudi and Vince Tyree and some of the other changes that have gone on at U of L here in the past few months. But I do want to get back to the question about the out-of-state alumni. Do they have a different perception of the university and what's going on at U of L than we do perhaps here when we get all the media, positive and negative, here in Louisville? But if you're in the Indianapolis chapter or Portland, Maine chapter of the U of L alumni, you may not know, you're not getting all that. So is there a different perception?
There is a slightly different perception. They don't get some of the day-to-day media coverage of it, obviously. When something big happens, they do hear it, whether it's positive or negative. But they tend not to get involved in some of the things that we may feel here locally that we hear about and we live and breathe it every day. So it's a little different. They may say, hey, I haven't even heard anything about that. And sometimes that's a good thing. But in other ways, we also want to make sure they hear all the good news too.
All right, getting back on Dr. Bendapudi, what are you telling your fellow alumni about Dr. Bendapudi?
I tell them they are going to be elated when they get a chance to meet her, when they get a chance to see what her vision is. She is very consistent in what her goal is, and that is for the students to have a great experience, for the faculty, staff, administration to have a great place to work, and for the alumni and the community to feel like this is a great place to invest in. Mm-hmm. And it is going to resonate, I believe. At this time, it's a perfect time for it to happen, and I think her efforts are going to be noticed.
So let's talk a little bit about athletics. That's the window that a lot of folks see U of L through, and obviously a lot of alumni are very excited most of the time about athletics. What's been the feel out there among U of L alumni about Vince Tyree and the direction that the athletic program is going?
Yeah, one thing, not everyone is interested in just what the athletics department does, but there obviously is a lot of people that are. So we want to make sure we're working in tandem with that. We are not looking to make it a athletic versus a non-athletic event, but we know that people have a very keen interest in getting together or celebrating the wins or discussing the losses of our athletic teams.
All right, sports bring people together.
It absolutely does bring us together, and so we understand it's not the only thing, but it is a big thing, and we want to make sure we're doing that. I think one thing that Vince and his staff seem to be doing is they are very interested in working together with on campus, not only with the alumni, but with on campus in general, with the deans and things that I think are important. I think we all should be going toward the same goal.
I can tell you that has been the case, and from those of us who work on campus, it's been a delight to work with Vince Tyree and his staff over there. But are alumni seeing that, or are alumni still feeling a little bit of pain about the whole way that the previous administration went down?
I don't know if there's probably some heartburn that'll always be there, but I think overall it's been very positive. I think the recent news and positive news that Vince and his staff have going on have been well received, and I think that'll continue.
I think so too.
We don't have a way necessarily to know exactly everyone's thoughts. We'd love to know everyone's thoughts, but what I can say is I don't think we're trying to say, or Vince or anybody on campus is trying to say that what happened in the past with past staffs and departments is something we should to downgrade. Mm-hmm. I think the fact is we're all moving on, and we're moving forward, and there's great things going on with the athletics department.
Again, we're talking with Kelly Hodges, the president of the UofL Alumni Association. What is the Alumni Association doing out in the community, in the Louisville community in general, and on campus?
Yeah, I think one thing we always will try to do is have a presence, whether that be in any of the colleges on campus, and that's all of them, from arts and science to business to law to medicine to graduate studies, is to make sure that our alumni feel connected and have a way to support their time, their talent, their treasure, all of those things we're interested in. We're not interested in just saying, hey, how much do you donate or can you donate? I'm interested in people's talent and what they can provide in guidance. We would love to have more mentoring going on with current students. We would love to have ways to connect the working community with the student body as they come in, they transition into the workforce. The unique thing we have in this community, we don't live in a college town where people have to come here for 4 years, they get a degree and leave. We live in a place where you can start connecting from the get-go in a metropolitan area that has a cosmopolitan feel to it that you might live and work the rest of your life, which is why we have 80,000 plus people, alumni who live in this metropolitan area. So we want to have a bigger presence in that, and that's what we're working on today in some of our board meetings is how do we take that a step further to become more of a presence as a university alumni, not just a fan base, but an alumni who went to school here and graduated from here and have a love for the university.
And help keep the outstanding students that we're turning out from the University of Louisville, keep them in Louisville to fill some of these jobs.
We would love to have them here. And we understand that people are going to go on and do things, but the ones that are here, we love having here, but we want to make sure it's a positive experience for them either way.
And coming up in October, a couple of big events that the alumni are interested in. Why don't you tell us about those?
Yeah, we definitely want to highlight these. Obviously, homecoming is a annual occurrence. One thing we're really talking about is making sure that alumni connect with homecoming. When I went to school here and when many people went to school here years ago, we didn't really have a huge connection to our alumni during homecoming week. That's something we would like to improve. We've added the parade back in, and those are things that we would like the community and alumni to celebrate, not just the current students, although we want the current students to do it as well. But that's at the end of October 20th through the 27th. That week is a celebration of homecoming. We would love to have more people coming home. And even if it's for the 80,000 who live in the area, we know there's a lot of those folks who have not been on campus recently.
Need to get here. Trust us.
They need to take a walk through campus. We'd love to have a tour. And I even told Neely that when we met, and she said I would love to have everyone come in, and she's interested in speaking to various groups and folks and to welcome them to campus, and we would love to do that.
She hasn't figured out how to say no yet.
She has not. She has not.
Get her while you can.
So I keep asking, yes.
Good thinking. Good thinking. And then her inauguration.
Her inauguration, I think, will be a very special time. October 4th is the inauguration. All the details aren't out yet, but I think that is another time that we would encourage folks maybe to come back to campus, and all the schedule of events will come out, but we encourage folks to celebrate that.
And if there are some UofL alumni listening to this program right now and they don't get regular emails and don't get regular newsletters from UofL alumni, what do they need to do?
I appreciate you asking that because we have about 69,000 email addresses, which is a lot. And what I always tell the board is it sounds like a huge number, and yet it's only half. So the fact is, if you're not hearing from us, from the alumni, if you're not getting a newsletter via email, if you're not getting mail to regular mail to your home or residence, please reach out to us and let us know how we can connect to you, because we want to make sure you are involved in the positive news going on. UofLalumni.org, very simple, all sorts of information. You can add your information right to it. Please reach out to us. We want to make sure we connect to all 138,000.
Very good. Kelly Hodges, president of the UofL Alumni Club. Appreciate you being on the show. What might push a person over the edge and prompt them to kill themselves? Could the weather be a factor? What about depression? What are the drugs that really can help and which ones don't? Well, Dr. Rif El-Mallakh is a professor of psychiatry and director of the Mood Disorders Research Program at the University of Louisville, and he's here to talk about those things. Rif, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you very much for having me. It's very much a pleasure to be here.
Well, good. I'm glad you think it's a pleasure. We'll see if by the end of this interview it's still a pleasure. How about that? All right. Well, let's talk a little bit. You did a a study where you looked at barometric pressure and suicide. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually, it was a follow-up study. So over a decade ago, we originally looked at a study looking at weather variables in general, and actually the original purpose of that study was looking at emergency psychiatric visits. And what we found was I'll give you the interpretation and go back and tell you the data. What we found was that of all the weather variables that we looked at, barometric pressure was statistically associated with what we interpreted to be impulsive behavior. And we defined impulsive behavior as people doing something that ended up resulting them in showing up in a psychiatric emergency room. And the reason we said that was impulsive is because there was actually no association between any of the weather variables and people needing to be in the hospital. But there was association, there was an increase of people coming to the emergency room for something that was generally impulsive and then being discharged that same day.
And so was it low barometric pressure or high barometric pressure?
Low barometric pressure.
Okay.
And
so the barometric pressure is low, and some of these people had an incident, a psychiatric incident.
And it wasn't so our original hypothesis was that it would be an increase in impulsivity. So we went back and got police records for person-to-person violence, assaults. Almost always all assaults are not planned. People don't plan their fights. People don't plan any of these things. These are generally things that happen spontaneously, and again, probably related to an increase in impulsive behaviors. And we found, again, that assaults were increased when the pressure was low.
Barometric pressure.
When the barometric pressure was low. And barometric pressure, by the way, just so that people understand, it's just sort of the pressure of, if you will, the weight of the atmosphere on top of us. And the barometric pressure changes really as with weather patterns. And the easiest way for a person to know that a barometric pressure is low is to feel wind. If you feel wind, it's usually because you're in a low area and an adjoining high pressure area is pushing the air where you're at.
So we're getting a meteorology lesson here too. That's great.
So that's how you know barometric pressure is going. And if you think about it, wind is generally associated with bad weather. So, rain and other things like that. So we actually, at that time, many years ago, looked at suicide because we thought, well, okay, suicide may be impulsive. Is there an association? But we only had 1 year's worth of data, of suicide data, and it's only Jefferson County data, by the way. And so there wasn't enough statistical power within that database to show any variation. So that was an interesting study. And then over the subsequent 10, 11 years, it was actually 11 years, we collected 11 years worth of data, again, from Jefferson County. And now that we had a much larger sample size, we did the same analysis and found indeed that completed suicides are more likely to occur when the barometric pressure is lower, which is, again, suggests that at least some aspect of completed suicide is impulsive.
So the bottom line is you took this impulsive behavior. What you found was lower barometric pressure, impulsive behavior, folks showing up at emergency rooms. And over the course of those 11 years, you took more data and found, all right, well, those folks who are showing up with impulsive behavior not only are just showing up in emergency rooms, but some of them are committing suicide at a higher rate I'm putting words in your mouth now, higher rate when the barometric pressure is low than when the barometric pressure is high. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would put it in terms of likelihood. That likelihood increases when the barometric pressure is low. There's a couple of things to think about in terms of that. Low barometric pressure, like I said, is also associated with inclement weather. And all of our findings may be related to just what people do when the weather is bad. So if the weather is bad, I'm more likely to stay at home instead of go out. And, if I'm more likely to fight with my wife and get into a domestic violence thing. Or if the weather is bad, I'm more likely to stay at home and use drugs and do something stupid and end up in the psychiatric emergency room. Likewise, if the weather is bad, I'm more likely to sit and obsess about how bad my life is. And so it may not be just barometric pressure. It may be some of the aspects that are associated with low barometric pressure. It is important, by the way, our study was the first to show that barometric pressure is associated with suicide in North America, but it's not the first study to show that barometric pressure and suicide are related. There was a large Scandinavian study that didn't have enough completed suicides because they only, again, used 1 year's worth of data, but had enough suicide attempts to show, again, that lower barometric pressure is associated with increased risk for, at least in those cases, serious suicide attempts.
We're talking with Dr. Rif El-Mallakh, who's a professor of psychiatry and the director of the Mood Disorders Research Program at the University of Louisville. I've got several more questions about this, and I want to get to a ketamine study that you talked about as well. You said that it could just been lousy weather that makes you. Is that a possibility that it's really not low barometric pressure? It's just a cloudy day, so that's why I'm bummed out and I'm more likely to commit suicide?
Not because I'm bummed out, but because of other things. Actually, people are more likely to actually kill themselves on sunny days, not cloudy days. Yeah, so you can have low barometric pressure and still have a sunny day.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not always inclement weather, but that statistical association isn't as great as low barometric pressure.
Was this a big deal when you had this first study linking these two together in the United States?
No. I mean, it's because we don't have a mechanism. We don't know why this is. And then this is also a statistical association. It doesn't mean that, I'm feeling bad and the pressure drops, I'm going to kill myself tomorrow. It absolutely doesn't tell you that. It's a statistical association. So it really just says, well, one of the variables is in here someplace, and we don't know what it is. So it's interesting, but it's not as informative as you would think it is. And then there is also something I want to bring up with this. So, one of the interesting things is when you look at completed suicides, people are much more likely to kill themselves if they actually plan it. So if I'm,
it's not on a whim.
It doesn't look like that. But I think that suicide is a combination of both, planned and impulsive. That is, I'm feeling bad, I'm going to go ahead and write out my will, I'm going to go ahead and write a suicide note, but I'm not necessarily going to commit suicide today at 6 o'clock. I've done all this planning, and then there's going to be some other variable, perhaps something that increases my impulsivity, something that pushes me over, that makes me commit suicide today at 6 o'clock. It's not that I planned to kill myself. So I think completed suicide, is both planned and impulsive.
So as a psychiatrist, what do you tell potential patients or the loved ones of potential suicide victims? What do you tell them? How do you spot that time when your loved one's going over the edge, or you're going over the edge and ready to commit that final act?
Weather has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Again, it's just, if you actually look at the numbers in terms of differences in barometric pressure, it's really quite low. So it's not really enough. It's just a statistical measure. Mm-hmm. No, so that's never part of.
It's not part of the equation, but what is? What?
In terms of identifying suicide, the biggest issue is hopelessness. It's not just low mood. It's when you realize or come to the conclusion, it's never really a true realization, but when you come to the conclusion that the present is bad and the future will be equally as bad, and there's no hope that the future will be better than the present, and you don't like the present, that's when you start thinking about suicide. If you are in a horrible present, but you think that the future might be better, that there is an end in sight for this, you generally don't commit suicide. So hope is perhaps the one, or hopelessness, depending on which side of the coin you're on, is the biggest driver of that. There are all sorts of other things. We're talking about impulsivity, and that's certainly an aspect. So there's several things that feed into that, but the number one thing you're looking for is hopelessness.
Again, we're talking to Dr. Rif El-Mallakh from the University of Louisville. He's a professor of psychiatry there. Let's move on to another topic that I wanted to talk about, ketamine. It was a drug that I think folks called it the party drug. Gives you hallucinations. Folks, the hipsters at the parties would take ketamine to get off. But now it's being talked about as a drug that you can be used to treat depression. Talk about that a little bit, how this came about.
Yeah. So just some background. Ketamine is an anesthetic, and it's actually one of the first anesthetics that was introduced for what's called conscious sedation. So you're actually trying to do a procedure where the patient is maybe able to respond to some degree. It's awkward to use because of some of the issues with, like you said, hallucinations, and it transiently lost some favor in human use, but remained very popular in animal use. Party drugs, it's I think the street name is Special K, and you're absolutely right, it's generally used as a hallucinogenic.
So is it mainstream now? Are people using ketamine? Are doctors using ketamine to treat their patients?
No.
With depression?
The reason that ketamine became a focus in the first place in psychiatry, we've sort of used up our brain chemicals. When we treat patients, we generally use things like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. We try and manipulate those things, and we've got lots of medicines to do that, and we've sort of exhausted that avenue. And now we're focusing on brain chemicals that we haven't generally worked very much with, and one of the major ones is a brain chemical called glutamate, which is a very important excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. Glutamate is really, really hard to utilize. Almost all drugs that affect glutamate cause tons of problems. We study them in animals, but in humans they're really, really difficult, unpredictable, very problematic. And so we still want to use glutamate because we know that glutamate is associated with lots of psychiatric symptoms. The point then being, how do we actually manipulate that? And one of the old drugs, ketamine, works on glutamate. We know it has a safety issue, and that was one of the reasons it was looked at in the first place.
But it's not being used now. And if I go to my doctor, I shouldn't go and say, hey, I'm depressed, doc, can you prescribe me some ketamine?
You can't say that. You cannot say that. It is being used because there's actually really good data that shows that ketamine infusions can reduce horrible depressions, sometimes depressions that haven't responded to other things. But there's also now very early data, and we're actually involved in a study that looks at this, showing that at least S-ketamine, which is a specific enantiomer of ketamine, a specific form of ketamine, may actually reduce or maybe even cure suicide ideation.
Rif El-Mallakh, always good to talk to you. Thanks for listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert, and go Cards!